So I was recently interviewed by a writer who's putting together an article about how some travelers are very wary and hesitant to travel to Hawaii because there seems to be this sentiment that if you come to Hawaii, you're just perpetuating this oppression of locals. And rather than dive into that whole issue again, I think it's just very interesting to note that there is that type of hesitancy when it comes to traveling to Hawaii. Yeah, I don't know if people are as hesitant to travel to other places like Disneyland or Florida or even Japan. Like, what is it about Hawaii that gets people thinking twice about visiting? And I've thought about it, and I think it's because in Hawaii we have this culture war that other places just don't have. And it's not fought with weapons or any type of violence, it's more with ideology. And perhaps this idea has already been talked about in some sociology thesis at the University of Hawaii. I'm not sure, I haven't read all the stacks, but I do think that it's an important discussion to have because it impacts life for us locals every single day. And as someone from the outside looking in, if you're thinking about visiting or even moving to Hawaii, I think it's something to at least be aware of, beyond just the message of you're not welcome in Hawaii. No, but for real, you're welcome, come Hawaii, no worries. So this is the idea that I've been playing with, that there are three primary cultures here in Hawaii at odds with each other. There's the Native Hawaiian culture, there's local culture, and then there's Western culture. And we see this played out in how some of the decisions are made here in the state. And sometimes as a local resident, it's hard to navigate these different cultures. And perhaps that's why there's even discussions about whether or not it's okay to visit Hawaii. So first there's the Native Hawaiian culture. And this is the culture that's tied mostly to the history and the land and the people who first settled in Hawaiian Islands. It's where we get a lot of the principles and values that we still live by today. Things like aloha, laulima, malama, kuleana. And when it comes to Native Hawaiian culture, I'm not going to pretend to be well versed in it and try to explain it from my perspective. I think that would do a huge disservice to just the Native Hawaiian culture understanding in this type of video. Maybe one day I can interview someone who has a better understanding, but just speaking for myself, I can admit that I don't have a really good grasp. It's basically Hawaiiana class back in public school. But I still think that it's very important, even as a non-Native Hawaiian who's a local here, I still think it's important to try our best to understand that. And I'm gonna try and teach my kids at least a general background, hopefully more than I know. But that's not to say that I'm totally absent of any Native Hawaiian cultural understanding. Several years ago, I had the privilege of really learning about the Native Hawaiian culture in the context of Mauna Kea. At the time, there was a lot of resistance to the 30-meter telescope, or TMT. And what you saw on the news was primarily protests and people blocking the road. And from an outsider's perspective, you may not understand exactly what the big deal is, why there's so much against it. And so I had the fortunate privilege to actually hear from Native Hawaiian leaders who could explain why the Mauna was so important to them, and to understand the culture and the mythos and really almost like this science into why that particular mountain is so important to the culture. Now, while I do support astronomy in the state of Hawaii, at least now I feel like I have a better understanding of why. It's not a complete understanding, but it's a lot better than what I had previously. Because once you sort of peel back the signs and the protesting and the yelling, there's reasons behind it. And I think that it was good for me to really sit down and listen and understand what those reasons were. Now, as someone who makes YouTube videos about Hawaii, I try to be mindful of that Native Hawaiian culture. And maybe because I'm not Native Hawaiian, I can never speak for that perspective. And that's fair, that's absolutely fair, but I don't think that it disqualifies someone like me, a local who's lived here most of my life, from at least talking about issues. Now, I've read some of the comments that have said that I shouldn't be talking about Hawaii as much because I'm not Kanaka Maoli, that I'm not Native Hawaiian. And I understand that opinion and I respect that. But I would just want to propose and sort of push back a little that if that's the framework that discourse can happen, where one must be part of a certain group in order to talk about those things, well, it's gonna be a lot less discussion online. And as the rain starts pouring in, the second culture is local culture. This is, to me, the most fun. This is, I think, what most of us can relate to when it comes to living in Hawaii. It's the pigeon, it's the jokes, it's the reason why we ask, what school you in, grad? To me, this is the most prevalent culture that people encounter every single day. It's the culture that I think confuses some people because from afar it looks like all culture is like Hawaiian culture, Native Hawaiian culture, but really there is a distinction between Native Hawaiian culture and local culture. And there are some elements pulled from Native Hawaiian culture into local culture, but they are two very different things. And I love the fact that local culture is so complex because it's inclusive and yet it's constantly changing. It's almost like organic because of new people that come, because of new ideas that come to Hawaii, because of old ways in Hawaii and how those ideas sort of mesh together. And I will admit, as a local, sometimes we take this local culture for granted because we just grew up with it. You know, for us, of course we're gonna call this slipper, right? But for some people, they grew up calling it flip-flops or thongs, and for us that's just weird. And it's even like with our food, where rice in Hawaii is a staple, but for someone who grows up elsewhere, it might be potatoes or bread. And speaking of food, I think that local food is a great metaphor or analogy for this local culture. It's such a mixed plate because there's so much outside influence. I mean, you're talking about, of course, Japanese, you got Chinese, Korean, you got Filipino, and of course you have Hawaiian food, all kind of smashed together sometimes in these plate lunch containers. And for some reason, on the plate, it just seems to work. Now I can just say for this YouTube channel, this is the perspective that I primarily speak from because it's the one that, frankly, I'm the most familiar with. It's the one that I think is more relatable to a lot of people, and because it's the one that people will encounter the most, I figure that's the one that I should talk about. It's what I grew up with, and it's the culture that I want to pass on to my boys as they get older. But I have noticed, though, that this local culture is changing, and maybe for better or for worse, I'm not sure. There are certain things that I can look back on that are not so acceptable anymore, particularly when I think about local humor. Back when I was growing up, man, you could throw out ethnic jokes and everybody would laugh because collectively we all knew it was a joke and we could laugh at ourselves. I think the idea was that because there's so many different groups, everyone gets a turn at being the punchline of the joke. Maybe nowadays you can't say some of those things, and so in that sense, that local culture, that part of local culture is starting to change. And the strange thing is, I think from a mainstream media standpoint, at least outside of Hawaii, it's the local culture that's the most misunderstood. Now, let me try to explain that. Oftentimes I think when there are stories about Hawaii, I feel like oftentimes the media will be very quick to put together sound bites or to interview and get statements from people in the Native Hawaiian community. And obviously that makes a lot of sense if the issue is specifically tied to Native Hawaiians. But I also think that it's important to provide a local culture perspective. And maybe we don't think about that so much because we're here, but I think it's important to provide that perspective as well. Not to replace the Native Hawaiian statement or the perspective, but to also alongside that, put together a local culture perspective. Now, obviously, someone who is Native Hawaiian can provide a local culture perspective, but I think kind of hard sometimes, especially depending on the issue. But I do think that it's important to have that local culture perspective, maybe a little broader, a little wider, taking things into a different consideration. Now, maybe people may disagree, but that's something I've tried to do with this YouTube channel, is to provide a local culture perspective, talking about Hawaii from one local's perspective. And just to clarify that, it does not mean the local perspective, because there are so many people here with a lot of different perspectives. I think it's important to keep that in mind. But I think by providing a local perspective alongside a Native Hawaiian perspective, it may make it so that some of the statements that are being sent out there into the internet are not so polarizing. They're not so reaction heavy. And sure, for news platforms or social media, there's a lot of engagement with those types of statements. But I think if you ask a lot of local people here on certain things, you probably get a very good middle of the road type of opinion. But unfortunately, that middle of the road type opinion doesn't make it out there, seemingly, to the internet. And the ones that do get heard are the ones at the most extreme. And it's sad because a lot of those statements like, don't come to Hawaii, those are the ones that make it out there, but there's no other opinion, it seems like. And so I think it's unfortunate that some of the opinions that stand out are the don't come to Hawaii opinions. And there's nothing to counter that. There's no discourse, there's no talking about that, especially with how siloed social media can be at times. And so I hope that when people find these videos, as ordinary and plain as they may seem, I hope that they can see like, oh, okay, yeah, there's another opinion out there, and it's not as extreme. I should also mention that I'm particularly proud of the comments and discourse below these types of videos, because I think you'll find a lot of people who are in that sort of local culture perspective, and so not everything has to be so extreme. And the third culture at play here, it's the Western culture. Some people might think of it as the big bad wolf, but when we talk about Western culture, we're talking about things like capitalism and individualism and, oh no, the big one, progress. Now, I'm not an expert on the Western culture. I grew up here in Hawaii, but I did spend a lot of time on the mainland. And so I think I have at least a pretty good experience sort of within Western culture, at least separate from Hawaii. And also as local people, we're not somehow exempt or fully protected or sheltered off from Western culture. It's all around us. And to me, one of the sad things is that when we think about Western culture here in Hawaii, sometimes, some people, they almost make it like Western culture versus Native Hawaiian culture and local culture. Almost like it's a 2-on-1 death match, like a handicap wrestling match here, where you got local culture and Native Hawaiian culture versus Western culture, and only one can win. But to me, it doesn't have to be that way. Because to me, I see Western culture sort of like the plate lunch plate. It's the container. It's the vessel. It holds everything. It's like the government. It's the economy. It's transportation. It's technology. All these things sort of hold us, and they're just there to be the vessel. That's just the framework that we operate. But within that is local culture and Native Hawaiian culture. Those are like the main dishes. That's where the uniqueness and the flavor for life in Hawaii comes from. And just because Western culture is the plate lunch container, right? It doesn't mean that it defines Hawaii. You know, I'm thinking about like just regular plate lunches, right? I don't know any plate lunch that I've ever eaten in my life that the container defined the taste, that the container itself defined the plate lunch. Because to me, the most important thing is the rice and the meat and all the whatever else you want to put in there. I think we can think about Western culture like that. It's just a plate lunch container. And so in thinking about it holistically, that's what makes, I think, Hawaii's culture so unique and yet challenging for people to understand, because we have this Western framework, this Western container, vessel, but then we have local culture, and then we have Native Hawaiian culture, and when people look at that, they don't know what to make of it, because on the outside, maybe they just see, oh, it's just like Western culture, but then you gotta kind of open it up a little bit, right? And you see, oh, okay, we got some local culture here, and oh wait, what is that? Oh, I'm not familiar with that. What is that? Oh, it's some Native Hawaiian culture. Oh, interesting. And so I kind of wish we thought about local culture, big local culture, in more of that context. And so as someone who's living here, raising my family here, I do take into consideration these three cultures. It's hard at times, and like I said, it's challenging to negotiate between them because you have to take into consideration all three. I'm not familiar with Native Hawaiian culture, but I'm still learning. To me, local culture is the most unique and interesting and exciting, and that's the one that I love to talk about and to share. But I also understand that we have Western culture here. We have outside influences, and that's part of Hawaii these days. There's no going back to anything else. And so I hope that when people are thinking about whether they should come here to Hawaii, whether it's as a visitor or even as someone who's potentially gonna move here, I hope that they think about not just the Native Hawaiian culture, not just the local culture or the Western culture, but to try to understand that it's a mixture and almost like this dance, and I don't want to say negotiation, that's the wrong term, but they really are at play with each other, and that's constantly changing because ideologies are changing, experiences are changing, and that there's not just one predominant culture here. And I think that's what makes Hawaii a very special place. And you know what, in the future, maybe I'll think about this differently, but for now, this is how I'm thinking, this is my thoughts, and I'd love to know what other people have to say. So thanks for watching, and aloha.